Now, I have to say that after the credits scene was some of the most wholesome things I think I've experienced this past week in anime. It's really interesting about the Don't Judge a Book by its cover because I am pretty sure many people were just assuming the Catman was going to be evil. While I didn't believe in the nice guy popping up, who I believe is going to be an occurring character based on character listings on different sites, I also wasn't expecting him to be a nice man who is guarded by the wife and his previous cat's spirits. And the idea that that's actually going to be something that our main character, Miko, can experience and basically observe is something I didn't think about, but in hindsight, I probably should have been expecting it after last week's episode, given the mechanics of this world. The idea that she'll be able to, because I think one of my favorite things about like haunted stories or horror stories or even thriller stories is there's so many times in our own world, you know, the idea of the supernatural. People say, oh, dogs bark at things that aren't there or cats see things that aren't there. Whether you believe it or not, it's up to you. But those types of stories love to use that mechanic because what if they really are seeing something? And seemingly based on this episode, the cat very much, I think, is aware of things that are around it. So the idea that we have our characters wanting to protect the cat at the end of the episode, but not being able to take it because of their apartment leases and things like that. So they kind of like send out an ad saying, hey, here we are. We're trying to find this cat a home. And you have this man who I wasn't sure why. My assumption was that people were going to target that cat because it clearly has some supernatural things attached to it. Clearly this demon ghost wanted the cat for some reason. So I thought the cat was going to be like a sacrifice or a ritual to either mafia looking man or nice guy who clearly cuts apart cats for a fun time. Like those are my natural assumptions. So the idea that Miko like turned down the first one and just the horrifying imagery to then passing the cat over to this honestly nice man who just wanted another cat to probably fill the void that has been left by seemingly the previous cat as well as the wife there. And I'm not sure if we'll ever see that character again, but I really have to say for a small moment, that small little part of the episode really touched me. I really enjoyed it. And this is definitely a show that you could probably sum up as you come for the plot, but you stay for the plot. And what I mean is anime plot is thighs, it's ass, it's tits. It is fan service. And I know there is going to be probably a continued mixed response to either people loving it or hating it. I do this every October. Once October starts up all the way to like the 31st, I watch horror movies, horror TV shows, play horror games. I love consuming that. So for me, the reason why I didn't really touch upon it in the first episode, though I will say I think episode 2 cranks up the horniness a lot. I think go to horny jail is definitely applicable here. I just don't find it to be a bother for me because horror-themed things, they love sex. It just is simply how it is. Every horror movie from back in the 90s, I mean, would always start up with like skinny dippers or teens taking off their clothing and then Freddy or Jason would come up and kill them, right? It's like the natural horror thing. And given the studio's history for the horny, and even seeing the comparison to different manga pages to what episode 1 did, it was already had some horniness. I mean, you give it to the right studio who clearly knows how to do the horror aspects and clearly loves the sexual aspects. I mean, you're just kind of, this is what's going to happen. I think we know how much horniness is going to be here. If you don't like it, well, I mean, at this point, I think you'll know if it's for you or not. So it's interesting, though, because, I mean, they definitely love certain types of shots, and it's going to get one or two reactions. You love it or you hate it. But, I mean, comparing the fact that it almost feels like a contrast to, like, not keep it nonstop horrifying, it's an interesting touch that, not everyone gets right, but I think Passion found a way somehow, because the fact that the production didn't let up in the slightest, in fact, I would argue got better because there was even more grotesque things on screen. This was legit nightmare fuel. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong, go to horny jails here. But I mean, the number of jump scares that I actually thought were effective, the locker scene as an example, I thought was really well done. Not the first time she opened the locker because I was expecting something was gonna be there. But the second time when they're like almost like shaking the camera, it felt like, I thought was really, really well done. To even the groping monster, I mean, yeah, it was clearly for one thing and one thing only, but it almost worked as both being horrifyingly disgusting, creepy, / you know what they're going for here. There was some really effective moments, but probably I would argue the most frightening was the line, because it's something that you could easily gloss over when writing a show like this. A character sees these horrifying things, has to pretend despite being terrified. I saw some people last week mention that she doesn't respond enough. That's the whole point. If she responds, her life is essentially over. She is shaking, and I think they do a great job with her reactions, with either her eyes getting wide or her clenching of the fists or shaking in ways. The fact that she accidentally lined up in a ghost line that was getting eaten by this grotesque thing. It's very easy to forget that for her, she has two different worlds she's interacting with, honestly, because it's very easy to say, oh, you know, the person in front of her just kind of looked like a normal guy. Maybe he was homeless, maybe he was just, not the most well off. Maybe he was coming home from a drunken hangover, right? Even though we should probably assume the worst, the fact that she just was looking at the menu, assumed this was a normal person in front of her, she lined up in a line that only she saw. How the hell do you get out of that one? I don't think unless Hana pulled her away, she would have been able to do something to get herself out of that. I mean, I'm sure they would have found a way had they wrote it that way, but for me, it just feels like I understand why she keeps this friend around. I mean, she mentioned it in this episode that because of how outlandish she kind of is, it's very easy to forget about the craziness in her lifestyle. It's interesting because you don't totally know, even though most people can't see them, it's very much implied that another character clearly can see them, or at the very least is aware of them, given the fact that they've given them actual hints to say, hey, move her out from this, because something bad's gonna happen. But the idea that, something could be attaching itself to your friend, even though she can't see it and seemingly can't feel it, what if something bad could happen, right? What if, the idea of shortness of breath, maybe that's not because your lungs are bad, maybe there's a ghost clenching your throat, right? There's some interesting phenomena that could be explored in this show about things people assume are just their body or a weird coincidence that could be the doings of ghosts and demons and ghouls almighty that could actually kill them. So the idea of potentially having to protect / ignore, live a normal life, there's a lot of potential. I mean, I was ready for just her trying to ignore, but getting a bit more information on the mechanics at play here and the fears she might have, not only observing people that are clearly cultist evil by the looks of it, to being able to observe past the don't judge a book by its cover, to the fear of what happens if I let this demon attach itself around the neck of my friend. Of course, they have their humor, like the fact that she felt a little like no one cared about me because there's nothing to grope. And yes, this is horny. It is going to be horny. If you think otherwise, you're kidding yourself. However, it's legit horrifying, and the contrast of sex meets horror has always been a staple in horror movies. Definitely more on the slasher flicks is the big one for sure, but I mean, I'm loving this. I really have to say it's high quality. The voice acting continued to blow me away. And I love just how they're continuing to find new ways to make Miko respond without giving it all away. She has to make it seem like she's not interacting with them and find ways to move past the situation, but they're putting a lot of effort in the most subtle of details in her face that some people are thinking she's not responding at all who are watching this show. But that's how effective it is. But I think they're definitely laying into the vocal internal thoughts and how she's mumbling and stumbling out loud to show how absolute terrified she is. The show is an absolute blessing. I'm incredibly excited for more. Let me know your favorite spook of the episode and what you hope to see with episode 3 next week. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.